We're here. We're back. It's Friday. This is going to start to be the norm now. 2 episodes a week. Episode on Friday will be a little bit shorter. And right now, the Friday episodes are going to be more Q&A, more like rants that don't fit into a normal episode. So let's go for it, shall we?
All the moms in the world, let's chat it up. We're talking competitions, uniforms, and all of the above. It's the Cheer Mom, yes, the Cheer Mom podcast. Cheer Mom, yes, the Cheer Mom podcast. Cheer Moms, your podcast is on.
Today I'm going to answer a few questions that have either been DM'd to me, emailed to me, or that are frequently asked in the Cheer Mom Hive Facebook group and or other Facebook groups. So here we go. There is a lot of speculation about NCA Super Nationals and where it's going to be next year. Everybody wants to know what's going to happen to NCA. I did an episode a while back about how it was sort of quietly announced on LinkedIn through an affiliate of Varsity's, not even Varsity, not NCA, that Varsity was shopping a new location for NCA High School and NCA All-Star. And that was because the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center was going to be remodeled. And at some point, I think the plan was to tear the whole thing down and rebuild another one. But that wasn't going to happen until 2026 as it relates to NCA All-Star. So we knew for sure that NCA would be in Dallas in 2025, and I haven't researched the new development, but from talking to locals and reading the actual development plans for the convention center, yes, I did do that. They are going to do it in stages instead of just tearing the whole thing down. So that makes me believe that Dallas may continue to be the home of NCA. So what's with all of the drama of them shopping for a new home? Well, it could be a few things. It could have been posturing. It could have been like, hey, Dallas Convention Center, if you don't want to work with us, then we can go somewhere else. And suddenly Dallas got it together and realized that it's not just NCA, but other conventions that would have to find a new permanent home if they didn't figure out a phase plan. It could be the other way around. It could be that the city planners said, hey, we figured out a way to keep you there during the remodeling phases. So time will tell. It sounds like NCA isn't going anywhere based on my man Justin Carrier's tweets and announcements. If it does go anywhere else, people have been tagging me in comments, and there's been speculation about Denver. Without knowing anything from Varsity, let me just squash that speculation right away. There is nowhere in Colorado right now that can support a competition of that size, period. Oh, I hear that the Gaylord is going to be expanding and building a convention center. Even if that is true, it still can't support. There is not enough infrastructure to support that many people coming into the Denver metro area. Maybe there's enough space for all those teams to compete, but there certainly is not enough space for all of the families and spectators and businesses and everybody associated with this competition to be able to stay anywhere close to the competition. So Denver cannot support that, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. there's a limited amount of cities that can support it. So refer to my previous podcast episode. You can get the lowdown and the info on that. But for now, it looks like NCA is not going anywhere. Good news, because I don't know about you, but I don't want to go to Orlando for yet another competition. And most of the alternatives, with the exception of Vegas and Anaheim, are just not viable for a late February, early March competition, just in terms of weather alone. Next question. Someone sent this to me and said, can you please explain the difference between Worlds and All-Star Worlds? And this is a great question. And it's a simple and short answer. So just like there are different circuits of competition by different owners, this is the same sort of idea. So the Cheerleading Worlds is hosted by the USAS, the IASF, which is the International All-Star Federation, and the United States All-Star Federation, and varsity. It's a varsity affiliated competition. It happens at the ESPN Wide World of Sports in Orlando, Florida, and it is reserved only for senior level 6 cheer teams and above. So you're going to get the level 6 and level 7 teams only competing at that event. In many circles, it is the most elite and prestigious competitions in the industry. It's literally the best of the best athletes with the most advanced skills competing against each other. There is nothing like that competition anywhere that gives these elite athletes an experience even close to what the Cheerleading Worlds gives them. It is a bid event. You can go back and listen to a couple of episodes I've done about bids and about Worlds athletes, but the Cheerleading Worlds, also known as Worlds, is what that competition is. So when you hear people say, we're going to Worlds, usually that means the senior level 6 and 7 teams. That is where Team USA competes. It is where teams from all over the world compete. And it is where most likely your favorite and most famous teams are competing. Now, All-Star World Championship is a completely different competition owned by different people with different participating teams competing against one another. It also happens in Orlando in April or May, but All-Star World Championship takes place at the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando, and it consists of athletes and teams of all levels and of all ages. So you will see the younger teams competing all the way up to the senior teams competing at this competition. It is also a bid event, so you have to compete at an event that offers bids to All-Star World Championship and receive a bid. They do have, and I think this is creative and great, they have what's called a battle round, where you didn't get a bid, but you're going to pay and show up and compete anyway and hope for the chance to compete in the competition with the teams that did get a bid, sort of like a wild card round. But they are two completely different competitions put on by different people at different locations. I get a little bit stingy when people call All-Star World Championship Worlds, because traditionally Worlds has been reserved for the cheerleading worlds and those athletes. But I understand that All-Star World Championship or even ASWC can be a mouthful to say. It's just one of those sort of nuanced, the athletes that are competing at the cheerleading worlds have earned and worked for the privilege and sort of the status symbol to say I'm going to worlds. That's just me. I know that I'm not alone in that, but it's something that's like not, it shouldn't be a big deal. But, there is a difference even in just the location and the time of year. So make sure that if people are talking about worlds, that you are clear on what competition you're talking about. So at a 30,000-foot view, that's the difference between the two competitions. Speaking of worlds and bid events, someone asked, can D2 gyms compete at worlds? Yes, they can. So there is and I see why they would ask this, because in terms of the cheerleading summit, there is a D1 summit and a D2 summit. Again, we've talked about this before, but just very quickly, the difference between D1 gyms and D2 gyms really is just the number of athletes participating in those programs. So D2 gyms is reserved for gyms that only have that status, that title is reserved for gyms that only have a maximum number of athletes. D1 gyms are, if they have even one athlete over that number, then they have to be classified as a D1 gym. And so a lot of times you'll see a division split at competitions where you'll have a level 2 D1 division and a level 2 D2 division. And sometimes they combine them, but the split, especially when it comes to the summit, is to give the D2 gyms a chance to basically compete apples to apples and not apples to oranges. That's a whole can of worms that I'm not going to talk about, because I've noticed, like, don't sleep on those D2 gyms. They will sneak up on you, and those athletes are just as good, and in some cases better than D1 athletes. But the split in the two competitions is to allow the smaller programs with, in theory, fewer resources, fewer athletes to go around and do crossing over, to have that apples to apples competition and to have the sort of equal skill sets and program sizes. In a D1 gym, in theory, again, they have more flexibility to cross athletes, they have more resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and there are so many D2 programs that it makes sense, at least for right now, to have two separate events. Now, I do believe that D2 gyms can compete at the summit and the D1 summit. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but the D2 summit allows them to do that. So to have kind of their own event and not have to necessarily like compete against like the big boys or whatever, however you want to call it. So back to the question, can D2 gyms compete at Worlds? Yes, and there is not a separate cheerleading Worlds for D2 gyms. In fact, they are also, like the powers that be at USASF and Varsity, have shown throughout the last several seasons that they are looking out for the D2 programs that have the athletes with the skill sets to have a Worlds team. Now, remember, it's hard to have a Worlds team in general. It's hard to have enough athletes at your gym, and imagine if it's a small program, to have enough athletes at your gym who have the skill sets to qualify as a level 6 team in terms of tumbling, in terms of stunting, in terms of age. There are a lot of factors that go into that. So I think personally it's very impressive that a D2 gym can pull a world's team together with the limited amount of athletes that they have. So they have taken that into consideration. And a few years ago, they developed the extra small category, which was geared toward the D2 gyms that had only just enough athletes to scrape together a world's team. It just sort of turned out to be the D1 gyms have infiltrated that division. It defeated, I think, the purpose of all of that. So they created a limited division at the Cheerleading Worlds. And that is, if you see limited, that is just for programs who have only one world's team. And that's one world's team in the whole country. So if you are, for example, a Cheer Athletics or a Top Gun, and you are a smaller location and your location only has one world's team, you don't get to compete in the limited division because you're part of a larger program nationwide that has multiple world's teams. This limited division is only for those single location gyms that have the athletes to pull a world's team together. So Louisiana Cheer Force comes to mind. They only have one world's team, and so they're competing in that limited division. And I appreciate this division for D2 gyms. Do I still wish that those athletes had the opportunity to compete against and potentially outscore the D1 gym teams with this of similar size and skill? Yes. But I do appreciate the opportunity being allowed for these D2 gyms to have this sort of platform of their own, an event within an event at the Cheerleading World. So yes, D2 gyms can compete at the Cheerleading Worlds. Last question. Somebody asked, is it possible to not get a summit bid? I like this question because people more and more are complaining how much easier it is now to get a summit bid. The answer is it's possible to not get a summit bid. It's possible to try for a summit bid and not get one. But it's a lot easier to get a summit bid now than it was 10 years ago. When Summit first started, it was the cream of the crop. It was very selective. The bid process was very different. At some point, it changed. We don't have enough time to speculate why, but it changed. And now more and more teams can compete at the Summit. My opinion is that it's not as special as it used to be, but it is still possible to go for a Summit bid and not get one and not get to participate in the Summit. There are gyms who that's a strategy that they have is, listen, we're only going to go for this kind of bid. And if we don't get this bid, they're not going to Summit. So, for example, a gym may decide if we get offered a wild card bid, we're not going. If we don't get offered a paid bid, we're not going. So it can be on the gym to decide that, but there are certainly teams, especially in larger and more competitive divisions. So think youth 2, junior 2, those level 3, a lot of the junior and senior level 3 divisions, where the divisions where there are the most teams have fewer summit bids to go around. So those, I think, are the teams that are going to miss out more on getting a summit bid. And that's a gym strategy too. And it's determined by a lot of things, by the bid mindset, by the competition mindset of your owners, but also where your athletes are at. So in terms of skills and the kinds of teams that the directors and owners can build. So if all they have to go off of is to build a junior level 3 team, then their chances of not getting a summit bid are higher. Now, I've seen gyms create or build teams in divisions that have fewer teams and that are less competitive in order to give them an edge. And there's nothing wrong with that. So when the international divisions first came out, there were directors that pounced on that opportunity to get their athletes out of a large, noisy division into something smaller if they had the age range and all of those different factors that go into an international team, to pull them out of all of that and have an actual chance at making finals or winning or being in the winner's circle. So there's definitely a positive strategy to that. But yes, it is possible to not get a summit bid. It's super disappointing. There are more options for these, what we call end of season events now. So I am seeing a lot more programs say, okay, we're going to go for a summit bid and we're only going to take an at-large bid, or we're only going to take a paid bid or what have you. And if we don't get a summit bid, then we're going to go to this other competition, and that will be our end of season event. There are programs that say if we don't make it to this end of season event and get a bid, we're going to make sure we participate in multiple competition circuits owned by different companies, and we will go to this other competition if we receive a bid to their end of season competition. So there are a lot of factors there. I am happy that Summit continues to, it's not declining, but it's definitely fading into, there are just more options. We'll just say that. There are more options. I was very passionate when my daughter was a Summit aged athlete. I was very passionate about Summit not being the end all be all of cheerleading. In that day, and it still happens today in some circles, nothing mattered unless you were competing for or getting a Summit bid at your season's worth of competitions. And that really bothered me because the whole conversation and the whole experience was around whether or not you got your Summit bid. And in the moment, we were missing the experience of competing at all. So I am pleased to see that there are more options and that more people are being open-minded about what their season is going to look like, what their end of season is going to look like. I don't think that Summit or any other competition needs to be the end all be all, the if you don't make it here, you're nothing, the only place to be if you are a cheer athlete. I think that we need to point people to the journey of the entire season and the experience of more than just getting a bid somewhere. That wasn't the question, but I definitely picked it so I could go on my Summit rant again. And that concludes today's episode, today's Q&A. If you have a question that you would like to submit, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook at the Cheer Mom Blog. You can find me on TikTok at the Cheer Mom Blog. DMs tend to get more lost in TikTok for some reason. So you're better off. Your chances of me seeing it are better if you go to Instagram or Facebook, or you can email me hi@thecheermomblog.com. Please share this episode with a friend. Please leave a review. Please share and tag on social media. Those are free ways that you can support me as your friend and support small business. So I appreciate you, and I will see you soon. Remember, it is all just cheerleading.